In Chapter 3, we'll discuss safe food handler, including good personal hygiene practices and staff illness. In Chapter 3, we'll discuss safe food handler, including good personal hygiene practices and staff illness. People often do things that can spread pathogens without knowing it. To avoid causing a foodborne illness, food handlers must pay close attention to what they do with their hands and avoid the actions indicated in the slide. Touching our faces can be problematic when we are preparing food. In particular, wiping or touching our nose can lead to staphylococcus. All food handlers should wear clean uniforms and clean aprons. Dirty bodies and dirty clothes can carry tons of bacteria that can possibly contaminate food items or equipment. You want to be sure to have a good supply of clean aprons. A good practice is replacing dirty aprons frequently. Seeing a food handler with the appearance of the one in the photo should be addressed on the spot. This would be a good moment to retrain the food handler on good personal hygiene habits. The prep area in every kitchen should be equipped with a sink designated for hand washing. It's important that no other activity takes place in this hand washing sink. The entire hand washing process should take at least 20 seconds. Let's walk through each step in the hand washing process. First, we'll want to wet our hands and our exposed forearms. Note the water temperature here, 85 degrees. Apply soap and scrub with this soap for a minimum of 10 seconds. Rinse and finally dry. There are two options for hand drying. Use a single-use towel or allow your hands to air dry completely. This final step of hand drying will also help prevent bacteria since we've learned that moisture promotes bacterial growth. In order to wash hands properly, your hand washing station should be equipped with hot and cold running water, so the hand washing water temperature can reach 85 degrees as required. Soap, a way to dry hands quickly if needed, specifically a single-use towel dispenser. You'll need a garbage container for quick disposal of single-use towels, and a sign or signage that is clearly visible, reminding staff to wash hands before returning to work. Gloves and hand sanitizers should be carefully placed in different areas of the kitchen for easy access, but not necessarily at the hand washing station.
All hand sanitizer must be FDA approved in order to use when handling food or food equipment. Hand sanitizer is optional. It should only be used after hands have been properly washed and dried. If at that time the food handler chooses to use sanitizer, or sometimes called antiseptic, they must let that dry as well before putting on gloves.
All hand sanitizer must be FDA approved in order to use when handling food or food equipment. Hand sanitizer is optional. It should only be used after hands have been properly washed and dried. If at that time the food handler chooses to use sanitizer, or sometimes called antiseptic, they must let that dry as well before putting on gloves. Long fingernails may be hard to keep clean and can rip gloves. They can also chip and become physical contaminants. Fingernails should be kept trimmed and filed. False fingernails can be hard to keep clean and can break off into food. Nail polish can disguise dirt under nails and may flake off into food. False nails and nail polish can be worn if the food handler wears single-use gloves and the gloves remain intact. By intact gloves, we mean gloves that are not ripped or torn. Infected wounds, cuts, and other injuries must be covered if they are open or draining to prevent pathogens from contaminating food and food contact surfaces. How an infected wound or boil is covered depends on where it is located. A cut, wound, or boil on your hands or wrist must have two covers: a bandage or a finger cot, and then a glove over that. Other cuts, wounds, or boils, especially if exposed, must be covered with an impermeable cover like a bandage. Wash your hands before putting on gloves when starting a new task. You do not need to re-wash your hands each time you change gloves as long as you are performing the same task and your hands have not become contaminated. Gloves that are too big will not stay on. Those that are too small will tear or rip easily. When putting on gloves, avoid blowing into them or rolling them. Single-use gloves are not meant for reuse. Take a minute to review these guidelines for proper glove use. The last bullet point can be confusing. After 4 hours of continuous use, we all know to change our gloves when we begin a different task or if we are interrupted. But what about ongoing tasks? This addresses an ongoing task that is continuous. For example, if my sole responsibility in the kitchen is to make coleslaw all day, I'm required to change gloves every 4 hours to be sure pathogens haven't had time to grow. Unless, of course, they are no longer intact and have become ripped or torn, in which case I would change gloves more often than 4 hours. The only jewelry allowed is a plain or a wedding band. Medical alert jewelry is not allowed as they can drop into the food, becoming a physical contaminant. Wear a clean hat or other hair restraint when in a food prep area. This can keep hair from falling into food and onto food contact surfaces. Do not wear hair accessories that could become physical contaminants. Hair accessories should be limited to items that keep hands out of hair and hair out of food. Do not wear false eyelashes. They can become physical contaminants. Food handlers with facial hair should also wear a beard restraint. These guidelines are for all kitchen staff, including dishwashers. Wear clean clothing daily. Change soiled uniforms, including aprons, as needed to prevent contamination. If possible, change into work clothes at work and store street clothing and personal belongings in designated areas. Place dirty aprons in clean laundry bags away from food items and food equipment. Small droplets of saliva can contain thousands of bacterial and viral pathogens. In the process of eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum or tobacco, saliva can be transferred to hands or directly to food being handled. That's why food handlers must not eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco when performing tasks related to food. Employees can drink from a covered container if they handle the container carefully to prevent. A correctly covered container will include a lid with a straw or a sip lid top. You must tell your staff to let you know when they are sick. This includes newly hired staff who have not started working yet. Your regulatory authority may ask for proof that you have done this, which can be provided by signed documents, training records, and posted signs. Although being short-staffed brings its own unique set of circumstances that could present problems, it's important that we encourage staff to stay home with certain illnesses, or that we restrict their activities so as not to invite bigger illness-related issues. When we ask a staff member to stay home, the proper term is exclude. They are excluded from the facility and may not come to work. Another term associated with attendance is restrict or a restriction, meaning the staff member may come to work but may not work around food or food equipment. This could look something like the young person in the picture. Unfortunately, this person is ill with a sore throat and a fever. A restriction allows a worker to be on property, however, they are not approved to work around food or food equipment. We mentioned briefly that all food handlers should be made aware of the illnesses that could be problematic when working with food. Not only should food workers be aware, there should be documentation or records showing that all food workers have been trained and understand which illnesses require exclusion or restriction, and which illnesses should be reported to the person in charge or manager. This slide shows the 3 areas of concern related to illness. The first area should look familiar. The Big 6, this is from an earlier chapter, but let's take the time to review. If a food handler has any one of the Big 6 foodborne illnesses, Salmonella typhi, non-typhoidal salmonella, Shigella, E. coli, hepatitis, a norovirus, they are excluded. The person in charge must report the illness to the health department. The food worker should be symptom-free for 48 hours. And finally, the food worker needs permission to return from either the health department or a doctor. In the middle of the slide, we see 2 illnesses that staff need to be aware of. Both vomiting and diarrhea require exclusion. The worker is excluded until they are symptom-free for 24 hours. The third area on our slide is sore throat with a fever. This illness could warrant a restriction, where the food handler is allowed to be on property but not allowed to work with food items and food equipment. It is crucial to understand here that if the food worker is employed at a nursing home, daycare, or hospital, they must be excluded rather than restricted, and therefore may not be on property.